All right, for this assignment, you are going to be taking an argument essay FRQ, and instead of actually writing out the entire essay, you are going to outline possible answers. Okay, so you're not writing out the entire essay, you are outlining possible answers to the essay. So let's first look at the prompt. Okay, it says, how judges use their role as jurists can influence their decision making. Some judges believe in judicial activism, others believe in judicial restraint. So we talked about that in one of our video lessons last week, those theories of interpretation. So judicial activism is using that power of judicial review to sometimes set a bold new precedent, whereas justices who believe in judicial restraint are going to use judicial review as little as possible and leave the decision making to the other branches. Okay, so following precedent instead of creating new precedent. So it says, take a position on whether federal judges should exercise judicial activism or restraint. Use at least one piece of evidence from the following foundational documents. So we just talked about Federalist 78, so it discusses the judicial branch and the powers of the judicial branch. Federalist 51, we talked about that before as well. It discusses separation of powers, and then the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution. So the 10th Amendment reserves powers not specifically given to the federal government to the states. So you're going to consider how the federal judiciary having power of judicial review could affect states' rights, okay, if you're going to use the 10th Amendment. Your response should do the following. Respond to the prompt with a defensible claim or thesis that establishes a line of reasoning. Support your claim with at least two pieces of specific and relevant evidence. Remember that one piece of evidence has to come from one of the foundational documents listed above, so you have to use at least one of those documents listed there as one of your two pieces of evidence. A second piece of evidence can come from any other foundational document not used as your first piece of evidence, or it may come from your knowledge of course concepts. And then you're going to use reasoning to explain why your evidence supports your claim or thesis. Okay, so argument essay, determining whether judges should exercise judicial activism or judicial restraint. So let's go back to the assignment and what you are going to be doing in this outline. So it says, for this assignment, you will be outlining possible answers to an argument essay. Again, you are not writing a full essay response. The purpose of this assignment is to consider different ways to answer an argument essay FRQ prompt, okay? So in this outline, you are going to consider how you might respond with the argument in favor of judicial activism, and then you're going to consider how you might respond in favor of the argument for judicial restraint. So you're looking at possible answers as to how you might go about answering this FRQ, okay? You can work with a partner, groups of no more than two, so a partner to complete this outline. Your partner must be in your same class period. If you work with someone that is not in your class period, you will get a 0, okay? Follow directions. Your partner has to be in your same class period, and both partners need to turn in a copy of the assignment. So, number 1 says read through the attached judiciary argument essay prompt. Okay, so we just went over that. The outline, and this can be in bullet points, okay? 2 possible thesis statements that would respond to the prompt, okay? So 1 could be federal judges should exercise judicial activism because, okay, that's a thesis statement. Federal judges should exercise judicial restraint because, okay? So those are your 2 thesis statements. So that's a start. And then you will go from there after the because, okay? So 1 needs to be for judicial restraint, 1 for judicial activism. The second part of the argument essay requires the use of evidence to support a claim. So from the provided list of foundational documents, you go back to the prompt, there's those foundational documents there. Outline 1 piece of evidence that would support judicial activism and 1 piece of evidence that would support judicial restraint. Make sure to include a brief statement on how or why that piece of evidence supports each role. So you would pick a piece of evidence from these options that would support judicial activism. Then you need to pick 1 piece of evidence that would support judicial restraint. And then just briefly state, why would Federalist 78 support judicial activism or restraint? Why would Federalist 51 support judicial activism or restraint? Okay, whichever document you pick, just make sure that you include briefly, doesn't have to be very long, why it would support that. Number 3, outline at least 2 other pieces of evidence outside of the foundational documents provided in the prompt that would support either of the 2 thesis statements you provided in question number 1. Remember, evidence should come from course concepts or other foundational documents we've covered in class. Make sure to include a brief statement on how or why that evidence supports that argument. Okay, so you can either do a piece of evidence for one of the 2 thesis statements that you've given, or you can do a piece of evidence for each one. Okay, so just 2 other pieces of evidence outside of those foundational documents that would support your thesis statements. Okay, and again, you can outline them, just briefly state why that evidence would support that thesis. And then last, it says outline an opposing viewpoint for each thesis statement you provided in question number 1. Briefly state, again, in bullet points, how you might refute or concede to the opposition. So remember, one of your thesis statements is in favor of judicial activism. One will be in favor of judicial restraint. So you are just going to outline an opposing viewpoint and briefly consider how you might refute it. So again, you are not writing a full essay. You are just outlining possible answers to this essay. So I really want you to think about different ways that you could answer this question and really think about, when you pick your evidence, how it would support your thesis statement. So if you have any questions, please send me an email. Again, you can use a partner, okay? But your partner must be in your same class period, okay? So please do not email me saying I picked a partner from another class period. No, they need to be in your class period. So if you have any questions, please let me know.